Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description, in every episode description to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say I'm watching so-and-so show, and then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it, and that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic, one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. One mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about Season 4, Episodes 1 and 2 of HBO's Barry. Now, this was definitely a pair of episodes that need to be viewed together. Well, I can't say definitely, but at least for me it was. The first episode almost felt kind of incomplete until it got its companion piece in Episode 2. So I feel like these two episodes work better as a pair. Like if we had got the first episode and then had to wait a week for the next one, I feel like this show might have gotten off to a rough start. But after Episode 2 and watching them both collectively, not only was I hopeful for the quality of the remainder of the season, but I'm excited for it. You know, this show continues to be wildly creative, and I think these two episodes do a great job of setting up pretty satisfying endings for these characters. So I want to start by talking about Barry, of course. Barry the character. I'm already talking about the show. I want to start by talking about Barry the character. We opened the season with Barry arriving at prison, and he's a pretty big deal now that the news is reporting on everything that he's done. The guards are even like acting like a fucking Kardashian just walked in, and like, oh man, he was on TV and now he's here. But fearing for his safety with Barry having arrived at the prison, Fuchs cuts a deal to be a snitch in exchange for protection in the prison and a new life outside of it. While in the prison yard, Barry kind of like envisions his theater group, like I don't want to say hallucinates because he's not like dying of dehydration in the desert, but it envisions, I like that word, his theater group out in the prison yard. And he envisions a lot of stuff in these two episodes that we're going to talk about, but eventually the real Fuchs emerges from the prison and very loudly tries to get Barry to incriminate himself because he's already committed to a plea deal and to wearing a wire and getting dirt on Barry. So he's coming out trying to get Barry to talk very loudly to alert us, the audience, that he is already wearing the wire. And there's a great moment here where Barry essentially, it's after Fuchs comes out to tries to get him to snitch on himself. Barry essentially apologizes to Fuchs, saying he was right and Fuchs was right, and that Barry shouldn't have trusted Gene. None of this would have happened this is the sad line. He said none of this would have happened if he hadn't tried to understand himself. And I found that to be a really sad statement. However, Fuchs seems to use this exchange as fuel for turning over a new leaf, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. Barry later snaps on himself in the prison bathroom in a scene that prompted a number of emotions for me because, at first when he kind of starts berating himself in the mirror, I'm like, I'm not responding because I've already seen this. I've seen somebody wag their finger at themselves in the mirror. Like, I don't need that. Then out of nowhere, he starts punching and headbutting the wall. And I immediately go from like, I don't care about this, to horrified. Like, I don't know. That just didn't seem like something Barry would do. And then this guard comes in and has to be the soft, I don't know, he's not soft-spoken, but he takes a very soft, gentle approach to trying to talk Barry down, right? And Barry then seems to do what I can only suspect was an attempted suicide by cop by telling this guy he's a cop killer, and if he had the chance, he'd kill him, he'd kill his wife, he'd kill his kids. And I'm right back to horrified at everything that Barry is doing. As the inevitable happens, I love this shot of Barry in this scene where the camera gets tighter and tighter, and then we start seeing the blood leaking off outside of the frame, but down his face. And it kind of just plays in a way that makes me feel like Barry is accepting, I don't even necessarily know it's death necessarily, but accepting the consequences of what he just said to this guard. Like, we see the guard, like, flip out the baton and shit, and that's when the camera starts zooming in, and we see Barry just kind of standing there, and it's kind of like, it comes off to me like, yep, I'm ready for this. Whatever happens, happens. And I thought that was pretty, again, pretty sad, I think. We don't see it, but this guy beats the shit out of Barry. And we see the aftermath. We see how bad Barry looks. And I mentioned earlier that Fuchs used their conversation to turn over a new leaf. Well, Fuchs comes in to save Barry and essentially reconcile. He takes off his wire. He tells him he loves him, the whole nine. And he's ready to throw their beef away because he's concerned about his friend. And we get some more insight into the nature of Barry and Fuchs' relationship in these 2 episodes with these cool flashbacks to when Barry was a kid and they first met, which I didn't understand that. I didn't know that Barry has known Fuchs since he was a kid. There's got to be a lot more of a, because it kind of came off as a business relationship for the most part. Like, hey, we're cool, but we're doing business. And these flashbacks make it seem a lot more like a fatherly type relationship, or at worst, an uncle relationship. And, you know, I thought these flashback scenes were really nice to look at. I love the way they looked. I love the how they were shot. Like, for instance, like we see Jesus Christ, Barry and Fuchs, yes, from very, very, very far away. And I just did a podcast earlier today on the Daily DVR Podcast Network, which you can find that. It's already up. You can find it in wherever you listen to podcasts. And one of the guys I was podcasting with, Andy, made a great point about how he liked how they were so much farther away, because that's kind of how you have memories. Like, it kind of seems like they're farther away, right? Which, I mean, in reality, they are, right? Like wouldn't it be weird to close your eyes and see a memory of you as a kid that feels like it's like right here? Like, it feels like it's kind of far away. But let's see. Oh, I particularly loved the wedding one. You know, we see this wedding party move into frame, and then we see them, they move through the frame and then past the camera to reveal, I guess, this wedding where we see what looks to be an older version of Barry and Sally, and they're dancing at what I can only assume is their child's wedding. And I love, like I said, I love how these were shot, but I also loved what they informed us of. Like, they informed us of the relationship that Barry and Fuchs have to a degree. It's a little bit greater than what we already know, because now we know that they've been, I was going to say in a relationship, they've known each other since Barry was a kid. And then the wedding scene just kind of felt like it spoke to Barry's desires. Like, this is what I want out of life. Like, I want to have a wedding where me and old Sally dance at you know, at our kid's wedding. That's what I want out of life. So I really like these 2 flashbacks that we see in this episode. In these episodes. At the start of the second episode, Fuchs decides he's no longer interested in the plea deal because he won't betray Barry, and also because he has this hotshot lawyer, right? And speaking of the hotshot lawyer, I love the scene where he's explaining all of the fucking, like, Perry Mason-esque performative bullshit and unethical things that he's done to win cases, because apparently in the lawyer community, being a slimeball is a flex. And I'm just sitting there watching this guy like, dog, you sound like an asshole. But he does sound like somebody who could win a case. But yeah. Admittedly, though, I still didn't trust Fuchs in this moment. You know, I was definitely still wondering if this was like a long-term play to get Barry to trust him, because when they talked in the yard in episode 1, Barry refused to discuss anything that he had done. It was just the apology. So I thought that maybe Fuchs thought that if he sucked up to Barry, he'd get Barry to trust him, and maybe he could say some more incriminating shit. He put the wire back on, take the plea deal. But conversely, throughout this episode, Barry only reflects on Fuchs positively. You know, like I said, in the aforementioned flashbacks. And that's why I think what Barry does at the end here, you know, working for his own plea deal, saying he'll give up everyone, but saying that, you know, I need to take someone with me. I'm not saying this is the case, but I'm saying that maybe this might not be the betrayal that Fuchs thinks it is. Like, it feels to me like Barry has some sort of plan, maybe, that could end up saving everyone. But that would just make it suck even more that Fuchs has now inadvertently convinced Hank that he needs to kill Barry. So, yeah, I don't know how this is going to play out, but there's a part of me that's wondering, like, I don't know if this is the betrayal that Fuchs thinks it is. But it does kind of jibe with who Barry is, because I could see Barry tunnel vision focused on this vision of his future with Sally, and everyone else be damned, I need to get here. So I don't know, I can see it going both ways. Moving on to Gene. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time here. Not a ton happens with Gene in these 2 episodes. Just I kind of like one big thing, but Gene arrogantly tells Barry over the phone that he's got him, and he's tells authorities like, I'm ready and willing to testify. I don't give a fuck. Let's get it going. And then he later has a conversation with Jim Moss where they agree not to talk to the media because he says something like it would I think it would make Barry look better or jeopardize the case. Like I can't, it was, a couple of reasons. Like, let's just not muddy shit up by talking to the media. But episode 1 ends with Gene calling the reporter from, I think it was Vanity Fair, and saying he's gonna tell this guy everything, and he's doing a fake voice and everything. And then he spends, I think all of the Gene stuff in episode 2 was essentially him moving from being Arthur Fonzarelli to being James fucking Bond, like leaving notes and clues and shit, Blues Clues, motherfucker, all around the city for this Vanity Fair guy, so they can find these, try to be secretive and shit, make it hard to find where they're gonna be meeting at. And this bit culminates with this guy arriving at a location while Gene was still there taping the note up, which I thought was really funny. And they ultimately end up at the theater, of course, where Gene, of course, does a one-man show performance of his entire history between him and Barry after he opens this performance by saying, I want to stay out of the spotlight. Like, what the fuck, no. But another thing I found interesting about this performance is that the performance suggests that he was suspicious of Barry from day one and has kind of been setting up Barry and manipulating him emotionally ever since. Like, he makes himself out to be like the shit, and he makes Barry out to be terrible, doing this fucking this really dumb sounding voice of Barry. I loved how he also consistently got sweatier as the thing went, to the point where at the end it looked like somebody just dumped a bucket of water on his head. Really great stuff from Henry Winkler in episode 2. But Gene's story ends in episode 2 with us seeing that Sally saw most, if not all, of this one-man show. So she wants to know what Gene is up to and why he... I'm not saying she wants to know. She does know what he's up to. But she also wants to know why he didn't tell her about Barry. And I just want to ask you guys, was I the only person wondering if in this moment Sally might kill Gene? It's because when she says, why didn't you tell me? I'm kind of just like, okay. But when he says something like, you didn't see one sign. I'm like, oh shit, she about to kill this motherfucker. But it doesn't end up happening yet. But I think it's a good time to kind of segue into talking about Sally, which is, I'm going to talk about Sally, talk about Hank, and then we're going to be done here. So I think Sally has the most interesting story in these first 2 episodes, which is surprising because though I've never disliked any of the Sally stuff, it's always been my least favorite. Like, I just haven't been a fan of the Sally stuff. But I really like what they're doing with Sally this season. The idea of how does one wrap their head around finding out you felt safe around someone who was killing people, that's got to be a colossal mindfuck. And that's how Sally opens up this episode. She gets off this plane going home to find out that Barry was arrested and what he's done. I love the scene with her mother when Sally's freaking out over what she found out about Barry, and she's having what I could only describe as like either a panic attack or like just short of a panic attack. And the mother seems completely unbothered, not even unbothered, almost irritated by Sally's response, which granted, it was a lot. But like I said, it could have been a panic attack, whatever. And whether she had a panic attack or not, she's certainly justified in having that level of response. But then the mother like places like a drive-through order, and I think that moment was supposed to come off funny, and it did, admittedly, but it was mostly sad that Sally's very clearly in a lot of pain, justifiably so. And her mother has this here we go again look on her face, like, my daughter doing this shit again. And I like what this episode told me about Sally, because I feel like I understand her behavior better in previous seasons, now that I see how her parents were. You know, her dad just seems like a fucking doormat who's just aloof and useless. Her mom seems like an asshole, like it's hard to ask her for help. Sally does it here, and her mom's an asshole about it. Like she talks about, you've dated not one violent man, but two. And then she's like, you sure can pick them. She defends Sally. I always say she defends Sally's ex, but she's like, oh, now I gotta warn his mom about what you said about him in this TV show. And it's like, okay, you're not gonna take your daughter's side here. And then when Sally finally asks for help, she accuses her of raising her voice, which she hadn't done, which prompts her to actually raise her voice. And I'm just like, man, Sally's dealing with a lot. And with two worthless fucking parents like this, it's even worse than it needs to be. And it makes Sally very sympathetic, which I don't think she's been up to this point. Like, I've never felt sympathetic for Sally. She seemed very privileged. But, you know, this adds some extra dimensions to Sally's character, which made her very sympathetic, and I thought that was kind of cool. Moving on, early in the episode, she refused to accept the call from Barry, but in episode 2, she actually pays Barry a visit at prison. And she claims to be there to ask about their dog, but when she gets her answer, she doesn't leave, and she accuses Barry of lying to her. And he gives a great response. I don't want to say she accuses him, because like that makes it sound like maybe he didn't lie. He did. But she says that he lied to her. And he gives this great response that not only shows you where his heart is, but also just kind of like how delusional and how just off in the head he is regarding his own actions. He says, I didn't lie to you. I just didn't tell you the part I didn't want to be true. And I thought that was really deep. Like, granted, I was pretty high when I was watching this, but still, like, I didn't tell you the part I didn't want to be true. There's a lot of shame in that statement. And I don't know, I find that interesting, but there's also a lot of love. And like, I didn't want to tell you the part that I thought would make you leave me. Like, I mean, that's understandable, right? Then he explains how Sally made him feel human. She says she felt safe with him, and he really latches onto that. And he latches on so tightly that she's forced to leave. Like, if you know Barry, like I suspect you do, because you're here, right? I know you sat up in your chair when she said that she felt safe with him, because you knew he'd really latch onto that part, and he surely did. And then things only continue to get worse for Sally, as her agent tells her that she can't represent her anymore because she's now too linked to Barry. And then there's the video from last season of her going off for her assistant and calling her a word that I don't think I could say on this channel, even though I say a lot. I use that word in not my most recent Succession video, not the one from today, but the one for episode 3. There's a moment where Roman uses that word in reference, in a voicemail he leaves to Logan. I repeated what he said, and then my ads were limited for that video, so I can only assume that that's why, so I'm not going to say that word in this one. I don't want to fuck up my ad potential here, but you guys know what Sally called her assistant last season, and also what she is now known as, so I don't need to say it. Closing out, talking about Hank. Hank and Cristobal have a nice place they're renting in Santa Fe. The owner comes by and mentions a struggle to find sand, even though the house appears to be in the middle of the desert. I love how she's like, oh yeah, sand's hard to come by. and like Hank just like looks behind him. But she clarifies that the sand outside, that's regular sand. That's not good sand. That's not the high-end shit. The high-end shit is imported from Africa. And Cristobal devises a plan to essentially corner the high-end sand market in LA. And for what it's worth, I don't even know how Bill Hader came up with the idea of let's have them corner the high-end sand market. Like, that is so random. But Cristobal lays out this plan to Hank while Hank's wearing one of my all-time favorite Hank outfits. If you saw it, you know what I'm talking about. If you follow me on Facebook, I posted a picture of it. I'm just like, this is a wild thing for Hank to be wearing right now. But Hank can't stop thinking about Barry. And once he learns that Barry's been arrested, he decides that he has to help him break him out. And Cristobal wants to meet with these potential associates to do the sand scam. And they meet at the episode title. The episode title for episode 2, The Bestest Place on the Earth, which we find out is Dave and Buster's, according to Cristobal. And there's an awesome scene where Cristobal and Hank are making their case while doing this weirdly choreographed presentation where they walk around this table in opposite directions and hand off the speaking duties as they pass one another. And I rewound this scene. I watched this scene 3 times, and because it's so random and goofy, and I couldn't figure out like the why behind it. Like, was this just kind of like, hey, let's just do something that's kind of weird and kind of like off, and it'll just be funny. But I don't know. It was fun because, like, okay, so in one of the passes we didn't see Hank running in the opposite direction for whatever reason. We don't know why. There are a couple of times where I felt like the table was just like way bigger. Like sometimes they go around and the table would seem normal sized, and I think it was because Hank walked faster, and then Cristobal would walk around it and he'd be moving slower, and the table felt massive. And I'm like, where's Hank? Why haven't they passed each other yet? It's such a weird scene, but it's really fun. I really enjoyed it. And then they later do this this knockoff TED Talk where they build up the sand idea, and then Hank randomly goes, I'm paraphrasing, obviously. He basically like, and we got the Splash Brothers of Assassins, Barry Berkman, to help us out. And for one, I'm just like, why would you even need Barry for this idea? Like, do you need the Splash Brothers of Assassins to corner the sand market? Speaking of which, for those that don't know, the Splash Brothers are Klay Thompson and Steph Curry that play for the Warriors. They're known as the Splash Brothers, so it's kind of like saying, like, you know, they're known as like the best shooters in the NBA, so best shooters. Anyway, but I think that Hank's mental state is why he would even, I don't even want to say suggest Barry for this job, because I don't even think he really needs Barry for the job. I think it's more like he wants an excuse to break Barry out so badly that he's lazily trying to attach Barry to their, they called it legal, but I feel like this isn't legal, semi-legal business idea. But I also think this speaks to Hank's lack of desire to live this sheltered life. You know, him and Cristobal had that nice place. It seemed very chill. They could have just stayed there. At the very least, they could have just done the sand thing. There's no reason to loop Barry in. I just think maybe that's not enough for Hank. It's a little bit too domesticated of a lifestyle. You can't domesticate fucking NoHo Hank. And he needs to do some fucking break motherfuckers out of prison shit. I don't know, but that's what I took away from it. I also like this in the scene how Cristobal asked if it was a yoke. Like, is this a yoke? And Hank responded saying it was not a yoke, even though he doesn't have that accent. He could have just said it's not a joke. But I don't know. Everything Hank does is great. Cristobal's response is particularly harsh, though. He says this is why people think Hank is soft. And as I mentioned earlier, this episode ends, I think, in a combination of Fuchs' delivery of the news that Barry has betrayed them, combined with Cristobal saying the perception of Hank is soft, and Hank closes the episode by saying that Barry needs to be killed. So that's how we end these first two episodes. Like I said, really enjoyable. I'm really excited for where the season's going. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments. I will see you guys next week for episode 3. And until then, peace.